Hello, everyone. We'll be resuming now with session 1. Thank you for those of you who are joining us very early in the day or very late into your night. But we're really excited to present to you a collection of 4 papers focused on advocacy and platforms. As a general reminder to all panelists, please do mute and take yourself off camera until it's your turn to present. And as a general invitation to all attendees, please feel free to share your Q&A and thoughts at any time using the Q&A function that we have here. In this session, we've got 4 papers brought to you by various groups of scholars, some ECRs, some more mid-career, some senior scholars, looking at various aspects of advocacy and platforms. We're going to kick off with Benjamin Timmons and Nicholas Briguarello looking at gender, I Hardly Know Her, trans talk, and TikTok's gender-conscious communities. Over to you, please. Benjamin, anytime you're ready, feel free to share your screen.
Fantastic, thank you. Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon and good evening, depending on your time zone. My name is Benjamin Timmons. I'm a social media marketing manager, as well as a researcher. And today I'll be the presenting author of Gender, I Hardly Know Her, co-authored with Nicholas Briguarello, PhD from the University of Minnesota. Before doing anything else, of course, I'd like to acknowledge the Massachusetts tribe, who are the original inhabitants of the land from which I'm speaking to you. I'd like to pay respect both to the land and the tribe to whom it is sacred. Finally, a very big thank you to the TikTok Cultures Research Network for putting together this symposium. So a little bit of an overview of our presentation today. We'd like to share a little bit of the preliminary analytical data from an ongoing project in which we follow the walkthrough method and to gain entry into TikTok and the trans and non-binary community of content creators on it, to better understand also how it intersects with the well-publicized by this point For You algorithm, and engaging as essentially as participant observers. We're currently working to better understand that intersection of all these sorts of things. And what we're discussing today is the preliminary results. Just for reflexivity, both Nicholas Bree and I do identify as non-binary. And for clarity, we do use the belief that non-binary identity falls under the trans umbrella in order to use trans talk from here through the rest of the presentation as shorthand for all self-identified transgender and non-binary content and the ensuing community on the app. With all that in mind, let's talk about what trans talk is and why it's so novel. Much like Black Twitter before it, trans talk is both an amorphous community and an ever-changing collection of content created by self-identified trans and non-binary users. Some of the created content has nothing to do with gender or sexuality, but most of it does. Indeed, much like the concept of an enthymeme, where one of the premises in a logical equation isn't stated, but it's rather implicit, trans talk's jokes, its comments, its conversations are so often centered around the trans experience, even if the content in question doesn't directly reference it. If being trans is a revolutionary act, then the revolution continues on TikTok with every uploaded video from a trans or NB content creator. So there are some main sort of call them core tenets of trans talk. And we're going to go through a couple of them. And of course, comedy, like so many other portions or parts of TikTok, it's really core to the experience. A key part of the trans talk comedy is the ability to joke and joke well about being trans. We just had a fantastic presentation about the idea of sort of punching up and punching down. Both of those things, quite a bit more punching up, happens on trans talk. There's also a bit of potentially punching across. A central feature of much of trans talk's comedy is its ability to sort of invert transphobia, like we just talked about punching up. When transphobes say things like the worst thing that a preoperative or a non-operative trans femme person can have is a penis, trans talk is an almost unending stream of dick jokes, with, of course, the additional comedic layer that they're mostly made by women or trans femme people. It is essentially a reclamation of what has previously been used as an insult or a slur or a way of maligning these people. And of course, comedy sits atop a layer of shared discomfort and struggle in general, trans talk is no different. One common meme, one of my favorites, is a particular TikTok sound. It's a clip from the Disney Channel show Gravity Falls, where the character Stan is forced to sing a song. I'm Stan and I was wrong. I'm singing the Stan wrong song. It's frequently used as a backdrop as users sort of reach onto their wall to pull off one LGBTQ flag, potentially saying non-binary identity, and putting another one up that signifies potentially trans identity. It really does absolutely speak to this concept that exists on TikTok and everywhere, that gender is a journey, and the resulting comedy moves quite a bit further than the sort of laugh at my pain modality. It's based on this shared experience. Not only is this an experience that's being held by the person pulling the flag down to this silly song, quite often the people in the comment section are going through it as well. The comment section on those videos are so often filled with people saying, you know, congratulations on your journey, it's okay, I'm in a similar situation. Not only does it sort of the content bring two people together, but the engagements with it. And that really creates what we sort of call not just a shared experience, but a self-perpetuating community. If something lands on your For You page and it speaks to you, you engage with it. The more that you engage with that content, the more you engage with the people behind it. And this sort of creates the self-perpetuating, this sort of community in which an amorphous mass of people have these shared experiences or shared affinities. Trans talk. Trans talk also takes a more serious tone occasionally. In talking about things like lived experiences, it's a great way, specifically the ability to answer a comment by posting it on top of your video. There becomes sort of an AMA approach to education, right? And ask me anything. I want to respond to your comment and tell you about the experience potentially of receiving top or bottom surgery. And really, because trans talk is not an insular community, because TikTok's communities are never insular, anyone can sort of see things, and content is served to many people, you kind of end up with a situation, especially with very well-meaning allied cis heterosexual users, where they're asking the sort of questions you can't ask, you know, in a situation where you know, American sex education, for example, just does not deal with these sorts of things. These are people who, you know, by way of the revolutionary act of being visibly queer and visibly trans or non-binary on TikTok, have the ability to be essentially activists who can share both their experience and their information. Finally, the AMA approach to education does not always focus outward at sort of explaining the trans experience to non-trans or non-NB people. There's definitely sort of the passing down the oral tradition of educational content in which people who have quite a lot of experience in the trans experience are sharing tips on things like tucking or packing or passing or dating or coming out with people who are much newer to the community. And it's actually quite nice to watch. Finally, TikTok wouldn't be TikTok without sort of the concept of thirst, right? You know, it's sort of central to so many of these amorphous communities, and trans talk is no different. Trans talk really focuses quite a bit on, occasionally on some of these sounds that really lend themselves very well to sort of jump cuts, right? You might have a trans talk user who starts a video and a particular sound presenting on one portion of the gender spectrum, and then flash cuts to a different part of the gender spectrum, and you know, playing on that. We've been told multiple times that Gen Z is the queerest generation yet, and the comments section of quite a lot of these videos of users saying, you know, buy panic, in which they're saying that they're finding all of the presentations on that gender spectrum by that user attractive, really does seem to agree with that. And thirst and the virality that can happen from both thirst and all of the pieces, the genres of content that we've talked about before, really can lend themselves to the attention economy, to to micro celebrity, both sort of small, within the trans talk community, but also within the broader, the TikTok experience. One of the differentiating factors, of course, with trans talk is that fame equals money sometimes on TikTok, but for trans talk, that can mean gaining the financial security to have more secure living arrangements, to actually achieve or access medical transition, gender affirming care, other sorts of things. There is also, of course, like other portions of TikTok, micro virality within trans talk can lead to a more lucrative following on OnlyFans or some other virtual sex work oriented platform. Again, some of those also become subsistence platforms for people to achieve their financial goals of achieving top surgery or bottom surgery or hormones or more secure living arrangements.
Benjamin, sorry to interrupt, but we will have to wrap up right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Hopefully later on during the Q&A, we'll get to your final bits with people, hopefully taking into consideration these keywords you have on slide. But for now, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Juno Kim, presenting their paper, Information Practices on TikTok and its Implications for Social Participation. Over to you, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Juno Kim. I'm from Toronto, Canada, currently located in San Francisco, California. Today, I'm going to be presenting my recent research on TikTok information and civic participation among young people in California. Firstly, I want to announce that I respectfully work on the traditional territories of the Huron and Petun First Nations, the Seneca, the Mississaugas of the Credit River, and the nations of Hinduna's Confederacy. This project spun out of my own doctoral research called Project Mobility that investigates the role of mobile media providing continuity of network practices during physically disjointed periods such as the global pandemic and cross-border migration. The current research is also informed by an exploratory study led by a group of doctoral students and Dr. Sarah Grime at the Knowledge Media Institute at the University of Toronto, where we investigated the viability of TikTok for educational purposes. So what intrigued me to investigate further on TikTok is this idea of network publics, which all of you guys are probably familiar with. In recent years, obviously, social activism has moved largely online onto social networking sites, platforms, since the conventional platforms have been limited in terms of allowing grassroots movements. And network publics fostered by digital platforms is a unique space for people to participate in cultural, social, and civic activities that have special affordances that other platforms, so-called publics, don't offer. So the four practices that's allowing network publics on SNS, I argue, are browsing, hanging out, small talking, and networking. And from informational perspective, the affordances that are allowing this, fosters network publics is information encounter, information seeking, information participation, and sharing of the information. So largely in the past, the platforms that have been studied a lot for civic participation and social movements are Twitter, in the case of Arab Spring and all the other stuff, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. But there's a little known about TikTok. I'm going to just skip through. To really understand how the process in which young people are participating in civic movements, I wanted to first understand what process it takes in terms of understanding the civic issues, and that's leading into the civic participation. So more specifically, the questions that I asked in this research are, First, in what ways do, three trending trends, BLM, for climate and politics videos enable and restrain understanding about the social issues? And how does engaging in this trend simultaneously afford and impede civic participation? I'm just gonna skip this. So the kind of, for analytical purposes, what I've used, the concepts that I use, affordance is more that understands the mutuality between social, collective side and individual side and technical features. And a quite popular notion called everyday information practices in information behavior studies that looks into, accounts for various ways to seek, identify, and share information on a daily basis. Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, I use discursive and textual analysis, about 1,300 political TikTok videos from three hashtags trending from, popular hashtags trending from 2020 to 2021, Black Lives Matter and for climate and politics. And the analysis, the information that I gained from that initial analysis was used to create a semi-structured interview, and I interviewed five high school students in the Bay Area, which I'm conducting even furthermore. So more information will be coming in the near future. So what I'm presenting today is something called a process of meaning-making praxis that's leading to civic participation. For the purpose of this presentation, I'm using the case of Cardi B and Black Lives Matter movement. So where about a year ago, Cardi B, a famous Black female artist, had a conflict with the police in San Francisco, where her husband was wrongfully searched and arrested. So the first step into their information practices in meaning making process is something called sporadic information encounter. Previously, digital content is largely sought through active searching through YouTube search engines, or geographical curation through Yelp and Maps, or through the preference of one's social network, what your online ties share and watched, such as Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. Interestingly enough, TikTok generates more individualized playlists for your page based on the total amount of time spent on particular categories of videos, as users simultaneously tap into trending feeds through a For You page or hashtag audio remix. Users also like kind of actively change the algorithm for something more individualized content to be shown. Sorry. So in the case of our participants, they, three of them actually landed on this they mentioned the Cardi B incident, and I was, interviewing them a little bit more deeper to understand how the process in which they got into this video was, some of them more mentioned Cardi B's music and remix of those, and some of them were talking about the women's right and things like that. I'm going to just go ahead a little bit faster. So, and then they got into the information verification, where they had to, verify what they've seen through different platforms and social networks. One thing that I found quite interesting is something called information dissonance, which refers to the visual and embodied experience of disruptions and confusion created for the information verification process. These moments of surprise might be considered profound moments of information praxis for participants, and participants realize the limits of their understandings and apprehension of issues, creating the opportunity for further information seeking and meaning making process. And this led to reevaluating, increasing understanding about the issue. As you can see in this code, Justin reports that the who knew moment, where he realized rich and famous people can get wrongfully discriminated based on their skin color. This new piece of information about the current racial issues in America led him to reevaluate his previous understandings about about racism, how racism operates, and build more effective and intellectual familiarity about the issue. Which led to civic participation, both online and offline. Yeah, so previously, so this is the circle, and previously I mentioned the 4 affordances of public networks: information encounter, information seeking, information participation, and sharing of the information. I would add, this research adds 2 more dimensions to that, whereas entertainment which increases motivation and network interactions, and another thing called information exploration, which increase understandings and their intellectual flexibility. And future research, obviously, there's a lot of limitations in terms of like methodology and number of participants that I had. So the future research, I want to look more into the users and in a more longitudinal sense, like how their information progress over time, and focus on their personal networks and how we can change their information about the about social issues. Thank you. Sorry, I'm a little over 10 minutes. Thanks.
Oh, good. Thank you so much, Gino. I really appreciate your paper. Well, up next, we've got Jessie Sage-Rochberg talking to us about a Wintherian unprogramming of TikTok's algorithmic ableism. Over to you, please, Jessica.
Hi, everyone. I'm just in the process of, it's not letting me share my screen. I'm so sorry about that. I am going to try to, here, let me do it from this way. Perfect. Thank you so much for your patience, everyone. It's a little bit early in the morning here, so I appreciate your standing by. I'm Jess Rauschberg. I'm a doctoral candidate in the Department of Communication Studies and Media Arts at McMaster University in Canada. Really excited to be presenting some preliminary dissertation research with you all tonight. It's called A Winterian Unprogramming of TikTok's Algorithmic Ableism. In this paper, I am bringing a cultural studies approach to human-computer interaction research, bringing Sylvia Winter's work on descriptive statements and master codes with crypt theory and disability justice to look at TikTok's use of content moderation targeting disabled users in 2019. So without further ado, let's get started. There we go. In 2019, I encountered a new word, shadow banning, and as Sarah Myers-West explains, that's when a social media platform will use content moderation, mostly through algorithmic infrastructure, to hide or censor a user's content. It's usually from a user whom an algorithm's machine learning will sense is from a marginalized community, and it hides the user's content. So it's not necessarily erasing their content on a platform, but it's like your account doesn't even exist. And in 2019, Netzpolitik, a German magazine outlet reporting on internet freedoms, published a really thorough investigative report series on TikTok's AutoR algorithm, which determines whether or not you make it on the For You page. And they revealed that at least through most of 2019, TikTok was also using AutoR to censor and deliberately target disabled users whom their machine learning had assumed were disabled. So I'm not sure if you can read my screen grab here, but it says people with facial disfigurements or facial differences, autistic people, folks with Down syndrome were all being censored by the platform. And when TikTok it was a huge media spectacle. And when TikTok came to release a statement, they said, we're a platform that really emphasizes advocacy and our users to be authentic and free in what they're promoting. And this was all about cyberbullying. We're going to change the algorithm. Yet throughout 2019 and 2020, TikTok had several ableist not to mention racist and settler colonial challenges and trends that were viral throughout the app. The autism challenge and the new teacher challenge are a few of those. So I was thinking, okay, what's going on here? It's part of the design feature. This is no mistake, right? So the programming of social media platforms and search engine algorithms, as so many critical digital race studies scholars have told us, is influenced by offline dominant ideological and economic networks. So if disabled people are not valued or seen as productive members in late stage capitalism, that is going to be recoded into the platforms that we use. TikTok is no exception. So I was left wondering, how does AutoR's use of shadow banning shape digital articulations of the human on TikTok? And to sort of investigate this question, I am working with this preliminary theory of or framework of crypt data studies, which is an interdisciplinary theory and framework that unsettles the ways digital social institutions like TikTok rely on networks of racist, colonial, and ableist technologies to determine who's fully allowed to be online, but also what's beyond the algorithm, right? We can't just settle with the critique. What's going to come next? I use TikTok's use of the AutoR algorithm and its use of algorithmic ableism as a case study. I draw from many fields, including TikTok studies with an emphasis on media studies, critical algorithm studies, disability justice, and crypt theory. Won't go into that because of the time constraints, but I do want to briefly talk about Sylvia Wynter's work on man and master codes, because this, I think, really sets the stage for what crypt data studies does, especially in the case of analyzing TikTok's use of algorithmic ableism. So Wynter is writing about the what has happened before and after and right now with the colonial encounter of Europe in the Americas, and how institutions like the Catholic Church and colonial powers use descriptive statements that were repeated again and again as strategies that sustain power of what she calls a white Western bourgeois ethno class as what is human and who is allowed to belong and fully participate in economic and ideological systems. And I'm not talking about individual people here. I'm talking about structures like, we might say, like algorithms. And so there are many genres, Wynter says, of being human. And these identities articulate how genres of being human or being not quite human originate. So things like disability, race, class, different types of political identities, right? And so in Wynter's work, she's tracing man one, which originates in the colonial encounter of what we now call the Americas, to man two, which is in the emergence of capitalism in the 19th century. And what I extend through my analysis of AutoR's use of algorithmic ableism into man three, the digital human, who has full use of a social media platform. To save time, I'm not going to go into one of my areas of analysis. Happy to touch more about this in the Q&A, but I'm really interested in how TikTok uses these ideas that have been around for centuries to surveil and decide who gets to belong through AutoR on TikTok and who does not. But I'm really concerned with, what happens next. And, if algorithms recreate already existing ideas about power and belonging, then are making our algorithms more diverse actually solving anything? And we see this through TikTok's Creator Fund. And I'm going to digress a little bit here. So in 2021, in January, I believe, TikTok created a Black Incubators Creator Fund to support Black creators on the platform. Many folks who were facing either algorithmic suppression or Black creators whose content was being stolen by some of the leading influencers on the app, right? And so they launched this fund. There were many millions of USD funneled into it, and yet Black creators were striking all summer because this diversification effort didn't work. So algorithmic justice on TikTok, whether we're discussing disability or race or colonialism, should not be reimagined within the confines of the liberal humanist idea of man three, right? This person who is always already, or this user rather, who's always already going to be accepted by the algorithm. And I'm drawing from Catherine McKittrick's work. We can't just reoccupy. We need to think about what kind of different algorithm look like? What are the other options out there? Because in conclusion, I think another algorithm is possible. I'm not sure what that looks like yet, but I'm hoping to define that more and investigate that more as I continue working on my PhD research and my dissertation, because what's working now does not work for many of us. And I think that if we're going to think about TikTok, we need to think about, and our world is becoming blurred between offline and online, it's time to rethink what our algorithms look like. So that's all I have for today. Happy to clarify anything in the Q&A. You can contact me here at my email. I'm on Twitter. Let's chat. And thank you so much for having me. And I look forward to the rest of the presentations tonight.
Thank you so much, Jessica. That was wonderful. We'll now move on to the last paper of this session by Aidan Moore, presenting on Jagmeet Singh, TikTok and the use of digital advocacy in Canadian federal election campaigns. Over to you, please.
Perfect. Let me just pull up my screen here. Share. All right, good morning and good night, depending on where you're coming from. Thank you to the TikTok Cultures Research Network for the opportunity to present here today. My name is Aidan Moyer, and I received my PhD in Communication and Culture from York University in Toronto this past year. And my research focuses on the intersections between branding, public relations, and digital culture and their influence on social and political campaigns. And I'm particularly interested in how politicians and comparable global figures and activists are increasingly turning to TikTok to help brand their campaigns through digital media, and how these campaign tactics work to challenge or disrupt, dominant themes and narratives in more traditional political reporting. So my presentation today is on Canadian politician Jagmeet Singh and his new status as a TikTok celebrity. And this is part of my newest research in progress. So I'm in the beginning stages of working through all of this, and I'm really appreciating the opportunity today to talk it through. But it's also very timely because here today in Canada is election day. And at the end of today, maybe we'll have some more insight into Singh's digital campaign. Maybe not, one who knows, stay tuned. Jagmeet Singh is the federal leader of the NDP in Canada, which is the New Democratic Party. And the NDP is the most left on the political spectrum in the country's multi-party electoral system. And prior to tonight's election, the NDP is the fourth largest political party in Canada, following the Liberals, Conservatives, and Bloc Québécois in terms of holding seats within the House of Commons. Singh was first elected as the leader of the federal NDP in 2017, and it made him the first visible minority in Canada to lead a major federal political party. He went through his first federal election in 2019, which was actually seen as a disaster sort of for the NDP, since the party lost seats in the House of Commons and saw their status downgraded from the third largest to the fourth largest. But he first created his TikTok account in the weeks leading up to the October 2019 federal election, and it's become this really key aspect of his brand identity, especially throughout the past year. But he was a really early adapter to the platform, especially since, despite being one of the most downloaded apps at the time in October 2019, the majority of North American public figures really only embraced TikTok within the cultural context of the pandemic in the past year. And there are other politicians and political figures from the municipal level to the federal level here in Canada on TikTok. And the NDP has a TikTok account for the party that began in May of this year. And so does the Bloc Québécois that was launched when the current election was announced back in August. But Singh is the only federal leader on the platform. So he really was in front of cultivating this very unique digital space for himself and his larger brand identity, along with, the progressive causes that he advocates for, like taxing the rich and the climate crisis. So I'm just going to quickly show you just a couple of Singh's TikToks to give you an idea of what his profile is like.
Nope. Yeah. Nope. Yeah. Nope. Yeah. Nope. Yeah.
So that was his his second TikTok that was posted just prior to the October 2019 federal election. And it really captured the attention of the national media here in Canada. And at the moment has been viewed over 3.5 million times. So let's just quickly move on here. Okay.
Hello.
a good overview of what his profile is like. The second video that I showed was from the beginning of the pandemic. And the last video has been viewed over 7.7 million times with over 600,000 likes. And he has other videos on his account that, you know, incorporate these viral trends to showcase the NDP's platform, which you got a good idea of what it's about in that first video. But he's also posted other videos of his remarks, you know, delivered to the House of Commons, like his remarks condemning Islamophobia and the uncovered remains of Indigenous children at former residential schools. But the last two videos I showed are his most popular in terms of likes and views, but all three really capture this playfulness on Singh's TikTok and the interactivity and performed authenticity that has become part of his campaign. Whoops. There we go. It's always awkward when you do those transitions. But according to a lot of the polling research that's been done prior to the election, you know, Singh has been cited as the most likable leader in Canada, and he's built this report primarily due to this digital advocacy on TikTok to connect with the public, and especially since his following on TikTok far outperforms that from his other more traditional social media profiles like Twitter and Instagram. And he strategically used his TikTok presence to help really build this momentum in preparation for today's federal election. And the success of his profile has provided him, you know, with substantial international coverage from both traditional newspapers as well as digital content providers. And I've highlighted here a selection of these headlines that give you a sense of how celebrity and youth are dominant frames utilized by the press to mediate Singh's TikTok digital advocacy campaign to, you know, to larger publics. And as we've seen through the past year, you know, TikTok offers this unique opportunity for social justice oriented issues to reach younger audiences and voters and publics, which Singh is attempting to do with this digital TikTok campaign. But what I'm really interested in is this interplay of TikTok and legacy media for political social movements. And TikTok provides Singh with this really unique platform to control his image in a way that cannot be easily maintained or achieved through other strategic communication methods. And I'm following here research undertaken by Marielle Lancelette, Vincent Reynaud, and Patricia Cormack on, you know, Justin Trudeau and Instagram and celebrity in Canadian political movements. But Singh's TikTok represents this, you know, continued symbolic power of the image in politics. And what's really interesting about TikTok for Singh is that he borrows these elements of celebrity and populism that we've seen from other image-oriented politicians, even though it's in the service for advocating towards more progressive social causes like universal dental care. So just to conclude here, you know, as I move forward with this research, what I really want to examine is this symbiotic relationship between TikTok as a dominant platform, you know, in contemporary cultural politics and legacy media. Because as important and popular as Singh's TikTok is, it is vital to interrogate how the press frames Singh's digital advocacy campaign for the larger public, particularly since, you know, journalists still maintain, you know, significant power in circulating political identities. And how does Singh's TikTok disrupt these traditional reporting and campaigning, you know, especially for progressive identities like Singh, who advocate and help circulate different social justice movements and issues in larger public discourse. So I'll wrap it up there, and thank you very much for attending, and I'm looking forward to viewing the rest of the presentations.
Thank you so much, Aidan. I would like to invite Benjamin, Juno, Jessica, and Aidan to come on camera, if you will, to join us in the Q&A. And as they're doing that, I'd first like to acknowledge that we were so fortunate to have these 4 papers here. For one, you realize a lot of this is very early scholarship from some of our more junior colleagues. For some of them, it's their first academic conference ever. For some of them, it's the first time they're presenting work from their PhD dissertation. But what a lot of you might not know is that most of these folks are also operating past midnight where they live now. So it's so impressive that they remain fresh and still sound so intelligent and sharp. So thank you so much for bearing with us with the time zones and for appearing here for our event today. We've got a fair number of questions, and we welcome you to start bringing up more of them. I'm going to direct the first one to Juno. I know you've already answered some of this in the chat. You've got great comments, lots of compliments about your work, but Lijo Lopez is also asking if you can share more about your work on the viability of TikTok for educational purposes. So for our larger audience here, would you like to tell us a few things?
Yeah, thanks for your interest, Lisa. It was like 5 or 6, I think it was five doctoral students, 4 from University of Toronto, 1 from University of Western Ontario, just gathered, and we just did crazy amount of exploratory work. We just went away and saw like if there are any possibilities where we can use TikTok platform for post-secondary education. We're kind of generating more informal kind of like reports that we can share with professors at the campus or other universities, where they can, communicate with students in much more enjoyable and lightweight ways, and not having to go really deeper into the topics, and just increase the interest in their in the topics that they're teaching. But if you're interested, I can always keep you posted. If you can send me your contact information, I can always keep you posted as the report gets produced.
Thanks, Juno. We have a question also for Benjamin. Amazing presentation. This anonymous attendee is very interested about the last slide we didn't get to hear about NT cities. Would you like to tell us a bit more about that?
Sure. Thank you very much. So GeoCities, for those of us who, let's hope that all of you understand Web 1.0 and Web 2.0. I don't know if I'm reverse dating or dating myself at this point. But GeoCities, I think, is really sort of a stand-in here for the idea that in Web 1.0 and perhaps Web 2.0, through early user-generated content, really going all the way back to Usenet in the 80s, the act of sort of a potentially closeted queer person trying to find out more information about the queer experience really involved sometimes going to college, getting internet access or Usenet access, and seeking out information about the queer experience. Where TikTok and its algorithm, we hazard, really shines, but also kind of puzzles us, is the fact that one of the key features of trans talk is that sometimes it finds you. The induction or the introduction of passive factors within the algorithm. You don't have to hit like, comment, or share for the algorithm within TikTok's For You for it to start showing you more content of the same ilk, means that sometimes the TikTok algorithm thinks you might be queer before you do. And really, in calling it the anti-GeoCities, it's really just sort of expressing that there's a difference sort of between the active exploration of queer experience and queer content on Web 1.0 and 2.0, Usenet, all the way through to Tumblr in the mid-aughts, to this idea that there really is sort of this nascent idea of, hey, TikTok made me trans. That's a very glib way of putting things, but the information and the algorithm and sort of the passive exploration finds you.
Thanks, Benjamin. As a Tumblr nerd myself, I like to say I think there are a lot of continuities between TikTok and Tumblr and queerness, so very happy to continue chatting. Our next question is for Jessica. You've got a whole heap of compliments, lots of people thanking you for your approach. A question in particular from Davina. Do you think that going towards open source or decentralizing small scale might be a step towards making an algorithm that works?
Yes, I see that actually happening in my university. Not part of this project, but the Networked Imagination Laboratory, led by David Ogborn, uses an open source coding platform for live networked coding with music and visuals. And it's, I know we have many of my colleagues are working on decolonial music languages. I'm not really on the coding side of things, but it's really wonderful to see that it is possible, but it might have to be at a smaller scale. And I know there are a lot of data healers or data justice cultural workers who are also doing initiatives like that. So it is possible, but I'm just not sure, can it happen on such a big platform like TikTok?
Thanks, Jessica. A question by DM for Aidan. We've long seen a lot of politicians on various social media what is it about TikTok that might make this new wave of politicians on social media special, different, or more effective?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, particularly within the Canadian context, because when Justin Trudeau was elected in 2015, so much was made about his use of Instagram and his hiring of his official photographer to capture him at pretty much all moments of his life in order to recreate that image. But TikTok really privileges the personality. So whereas Instagram was based on that still image and the ability for that still image to be circulated, TikTok is really it's about personality, and certain politicians really gravitate towards that particular platform, whereas others, like Justin Trudeau, for example, doesn't have that innate charismatic ability that does not suit him to the particular platform. So it's interesting to see, how different politicians perform their identities and perform their political personas based upon the requirements of the particular platform, which is why TikTok has really suited Jagmeet Singh, because he does have that natural charisma and that ability to connect with larger publics that really does set him apart as a politician. And that's why you get these reports in the mainstream media about him being so charismatic and likable, because TikTok really helps present that aspect of him as a politician. So it's a really interesting play on the image and charisma that really suits TikTok in particular.
Thank you, Aiden. Another question for Jess. This is a fairly long one, so I'm going to distill it, coming from Dan. In response to your provocation on what's next, the question is, how can a new algorithm address the ubiquity of the platforms that seem to be mutually constitutive with algorithmic ableism?
Okay. I've been thinking about this question. I will do my best to succinctly answer it, and maybe we'll need to follow up another time, Dan. But yeah, it is as you write, it's a feature. It's not a bug. It's not an accident. It's all purposeful. And we saw this also happen on Instagram with the content or the terms of service update in December 2020. And so that was really targeting sex workers, specifically queer, trans, and disabled sex workers, Black and brown sex workers as well. And so a lot of folks, actually, the solution was, let's find another platform that aligns with us politically and ideologically. So Mastodon, for example, was seen as like the imperfect solution because of how the user interface and the coding programs are set up. I don't think a lot of people ended up actually moving there, but I think folks are trying to think about solutions, because even though TikTok will have on its explore page like support X group, is the app actually supporting that group, or are they tokenizing folks for visibility and for strategizing their own PR to save themselves from scrutinization? But it's so integrated into people's everyday lives. At least I witnessed that anecdotally, that I'm not sure, are people going to move away from these platforms, especially in the pandemic when offline and online become increasingly blurred. But you ask some good questions, Dan, that I think I'll be carrying. So thank you for putting that out there, and we'll talk later.
Thank you, Jess. Another question for Aiden from an anonymous attendee. Are there key differences in Jagmeet and the NDP's use of TikTok for digital advocacy? What do you think the key takeaways could be for NGOs that are looking to engage TikTok as a tool?
That's a good question. And in terms of the difference of this Jagmeet and the NDP, so TikTok for digital advocacy, because he is primarily the main politician within Canada on TikTok, he's really been able to establish sort of establish a set. What's the word I'm looking for? It's getting too late for me. He's been really to set the parameters very high for how to effectively create a TikTok campaign for a political party. And it's this mix of being able to participate in these viral trends, while also too for saying, he is using the platform also to to raise awareness towards, the climate change, universal dental care. And some of his most watched videos may be the ones where he's dancing, but they're also the ones where he's dancing and promoting these causes at the same time. And it's a really unique way of engaging primarily those younger voters. And he's started it in 2019, and the NDP has invested in their digital advocacy campaign. And I think that's key for a lot of different NGOs, is to make the investment in social media editors, in TikTok editors, because it is not an easy skill. And I think a lot of groups pick it up and think we can learn this on the spot. And it's not something that you can learn on the spot. It is something that a lot of groups and politicians and parties need to make that investment in, because we see the increasing importance of being able to create that image for a variety of different social causes.
Thanks, Aiden. To be cheeky, at this and past TikTok cultures research events, we've always had people from industry join us. So I'm very pleased to report that there have been recent PhD graduates who have found themselves at least in part-time employment via these folks from attending these sessions. So yes, do go for it. Another question for Juno. We're very interested in your idea of sporadic information encounter. And given that the FYP on TikTok is so specific for every individual, can we talk about how information practices are shaped for groups of youth in general? Is there a sort of community or even a specific demographic for which we can define information practices?
So one thing that's really interesting about TikTok that's quite different from YouTube or other social media platforms is that TikTok is very optimized for mobile media kind of settings, where sporadic and very short bursts like information activities are like fostered. Capturing videos is very easily done with just one handheld device and without having another editing applications and whatnot. And also encountering this information, the content on TikTok. I use the word sporadic quite a bit in my research, is because it is somewhat passive, but there is a nuance of active participation too, where some individual users will actually actively search for particular keywords to find, as I mentioned earlier, information verification process, which is kind of like echoing some of the previous research on youth media research on like that kind of question the general perception about young users being passive consumers of media. They do take active position verifying the content they encounter. So there's some sort of like active participation in generating the For You algorithms. At the same time, there's also a passive side where everything is pre-curated and you just scroll it through, which is browsing. I don't know if I answered the question properly, but like this is quite late and my brain is quite foggy. But like please, interrupt me if I didn't.
Thanks, Juno. And the very last question is for Benjamin. We are very excited by the concept of a self-perpetuating community. So now within Trans Talk, would you say that there are hierarchies of who gets to perpetuate the community more? This sounds like one of those questions when multiple marginalities are intersecting or competing. It's also very open-ended, so feel free to take it in any way you like.
That is very open-ended. Yeah, what also comes to mind, a conversation that I had with my co-author just about an hour and a half ago about how Trans Talk does become sort of a microcosm, just like a whole bunch of other micro communities on TikTok. It becomes a microcosm of everything else, which means that Trans Talk absolutely can and does suffer from some of the same issues that TikTok does as well, issues of intersectionality, issues of ableism. Trans Talk, I think, either algorithmically, actively with, from a personality or engagement standpoint, does tend to elevate white creators more than others. It does tend to favor images of androgyny or people who have had surgical intervention or medical transition versus those who maybe have not or have not yet. I think those are things. What I do want to credit sort of Trans Talk and you know the parts of the community that I've been able to engage with so far is that perhaps in contrast to, let's just call it straight TikTok, Trans Talk does seem by and large to be more aware of these issues. I wouldn't say that there is a whole sort of a wholesale awareness across the board, but there certainly is a little bit of interrogation of that. You know, we talked very briefly about this idea of fame and virality being, you know, allowing for some form of fortune, meaning that people can get top or bottom surgery. There has been, you know, as recently as, you know, last week or 2 weeks ago, a lot of comments and a lot of back and forth on, you know, what does it mean to be, to look trans? You know, do you have to have intervention? Do you have to have medical transition? So these conversations are happening literally right now. In terms of the original question, is there a hierarchy? I'm not entirely sure. I don't think the community, which of course, like everything else on TikTok, is very much an amorphous and ever-changing sort of subject. I don't know if they know either.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. It's super eloquent. And again, thank you to all 4 of our contributors for being night owls with us and sharing your fabulous research. We'll now proceed to a 3-minute break as we transition into session 2, but do thank me in our air things and air claps for our 4 presenters for opening us. We'll see you shortly. Thank you.